Speaking of guns, and probably about where I'm kind of going to move on from this to a slight degree, there is a slightly related topic that I will be getting into for some of my last videos for the night. New York on track for lowest murders on record. Chicago, meanwhile, hits 500. New York City expects to hit a record, expects to record its lowest number of homicides since record-keeping began in 1963, reports AP. The city has had 414 this year, pardon my dyslexia, down nearly 20% from last year and well under the previous low of 471 in 2009. The city has also seen 1,353 shootings, again well below the previous low of 1,420 in 2009. Mayor Bloomberg and the police credit the controversial stop and frisk policy in part for the numbers. Chicago has hit the unfortunate milestone of 500 homicides this year, reports the Tribune. It's a tragic number that is reflective of the gang violence and the proliferation of illegal guns that have plagued some of our neighborhoods, end quote, says the police superintendent. It's also the first time in 4 years that the city has hit the 500 mark, though the Trib points out that Chicago had nearly twice that number in 1992. The city had 435 homicides last year, notes AP. Now, we could quickly look at this and we could say, aha, there's illegal guns and there's gangs, and there you go, record number of homicides. At least in Chicago. But New York, which from my friends who live there tends to be a more aggressive place. Well, I don't know many people in Chicago at this point in time, but I digress. It's interesting that they've been able to get their numbers down. Of course, pro-gun proponents would say, yeah, but they're doing it at the risk of our Second Amendment rights. They stop us and frisk us and take our guns. Well, if you have a legal permit to carry a gun, I doubt that they're just simply taking your guns away. And here again is a place where New York didn't just go into everybody's house and steal their guns. New York simply made it harder for gang members to operate armed and dangerous, outside of some gangs that sometimes permeate certain areas that use machetes only, but I would imagine those get taken away as well. It's hard to know where to stand with this one to some degree, except for to say that this sort of stuff gets swept under the rug for reporting the names and addresses of people who own guns. And I think that we absolutely have to, as a people, take the good with the bad. We can't sweep it under the rug for a pro-anti-gun agenda. Not that I'm necessarily saying this is part of that, but I had to kind of dig to find this story. And you could say, well, yeah, but Chicago still sounds pretty terrible. I got nothing on that. I can't disagree with that. But again, it only points to the fact that we are that far removed from Denmark. Denmark is kicking our ass and having armed gang members who, by and large, are only shooting at each other and not at what they know to be regular, average, everyday, unarmed citizens. Bystanders do get hit every now and again in Denmark. You're never fully able to get rid of that, but it's under such control that it makes us look bad. And what I hate about it is, instead of people taking this and saying to themselves, well, gee, we used to be number one in so many things. Why can't we make Denmark look silly? Why can't we have people looking to America and saying, hey, America made it work, either with guns or mostly without guns? But no, we're not willing to do that. And this is why I'm mad at both sides. especially you out there who are super patriotic, though I might emphasize the word idiotic, as in idiotic, because you guys don't want to make for a big solution. You want to snuggle and hold your sniper rifle with hollow point bullets or armor-piercing rounds and pretend as if you're supposed to have this, as if by virtue of being born here you need this, that you absolutely 110% must have this to survive, to live in this day and age. Instead of looking at the bigger picture, both sides, anti and pro, and saying, what have we become? Again, I have certain assertions with Tiger Lily's summation in her video about the idea of gender roles, guns, and gun culture. I'm just now still processing the diet culture that we are, as well as the rape culture, both of which will get probably more respective series as my channel progresses here. But to say that I 110% buy into the idea that we are a gun culture, that we have been bought and sold, and that we are all about guns, 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 well, it's hard to argue when you have people who are literally trying to say this in defense of why we need guns in mass in this country, including assault rifles and armor-piercing rounds. Because, yeah, when I go out hunting a deer, I want to make sure that there's nothing left of it to mount stuff or any meat on that bone. I want it all just decimated. Why don't we just make this like Fallout and formulate mini nukes while we're at it? Because I don't think that deer can possibly get dead enough from armor-piercing rounds from semi-automatic weapons and assault rifles. But I know everybody is still worked up, and part of me wants that to happen, partially because it keeps this topic from dying and keeps us from just dropping this topic. There was a time, a day and age, when I did wish it would go away because I've never owned any firearms. I've only had prop guns and the guns that you've seen that are shoot those little soft pellets, or those little BBs, the soft BBs. But even that, I've got a drawer full of those BBs I've probably thrown away because I don't use them for that. In fact, I'm happy to dismantle any firing mechanisms so long as they do their job as a prop gun, because again, I can add in my own muzzle flashes. It's not an extremely hard thing to do with the right software. But it's because, and I think that I'm not alone in this, it's because this represents a death to the old world. I've had my arcades stripped away from me. I've had my realistic toy guns, by and large, stripped away from me, even with the orange, markers to make sure to show that, hey, this is a toy. This can't kill somebody. Might hurt them, might graze them, might give them something fierce of a bruise, but it's not going to hurt them. A lot of the media I grew up with is actually extremely toned down. So when I hear people talking about media influence of violence, I have to stop and I have to laugh, because considering the 80s and all the broadcasting changes we've made since the 80s, this is tame compared to the 80s. I'm sorry. No, that doesn't hold water. Not to mention the fact that violent media has never produced a actual viable link to violent behavior. That, again, another topic. I think I know my world is going away. And it's hard not to be scared by that. The video rental stores are gone. Everything's almost digital, or you can rent a physical copy, but it takes 2 to 3 days to get to you, which I don't like, but I'm having to deal with because I have nowhere to rent anymore. The game systems I knew and loved are changed into these machines that are more interested in making money than in making entertainment, which is only going to get worse going from the Wii U on, unfortunately. And part of me is like a conservative. Part of me looks back and says, my world wasn't so bad. We had terrorists kidnapping people, but nobody flew planes into anything. We had our toy guns, but the worst it got was when they started having to put the orange cones on because too many kids were pointing toy guns at policemen, which is stupid, but I digress, and getting shot by accident because the officer had to make a split decision. It's hard not to look at the things that I enjoyed that were okay in many respects. And to see that the world is changing, it's altering, and almost everything that made up my world is going to go away. But it's even harder to see that it might be going away because it needs to. As much as I love my world I came from, that world of the 80s through the 90s, I don't really like the 2000s too much, but I digress. It's not just looking at it with nostalgia-colored glasses. There's tangibles that would take up a whole other video series to get into that are gone or going away. You can't really, physical film, for instance, Kodak went under. Hostess went under. A lot of things that I've enjoyed as a child or had fun with are going away. They're being replaced by things that are arguably better, but it's just some things, it's hard for me to not see those things, not remember the times I had, and then see people saying to my face, your childhood was disgraceful. Your childhood was terrible. The world you grew up in was horrible and it needs to die. And they're half right. I don't want to admit that, but they're half right. But be that as it may, did I turn into a Charles Manson killer? Do I have a gun rack everywhere with military-grade hardware, despite all of the media I absorbed, all of the culture that I am a part of, and the fact that I do use prop weaponry that resembles military-grade hardware for my artistic expression? And I could take offense to it on an artistic level, but I'm not. I could, but I'm not. It's a lot to take in. Growing older, seeing the world change drastically, it can give you whiplash. I can't 100% blame you pros and antis out there, because it's not always easy for me to change in certain respects. But when I see value in it, when I see what it means, of course, I'm willing to make the sacrifices, but how far of my life do I have to sacrifice? And I don't like the idea, I don't like the inference that my world is to blame, that my world of the 80s and 90s is the reason why we're at where we're at, and that my generation is the worst ever, and we are we are Shiva, the destroyer of worlds, in an entire generation. That's why I say there's some half-truth there, but it's not all truth. But I can hold on to those things that I treasure. I can enjoy them, even if I know that my son and my son's sons aren't going to get to enjoy the things that I had. They won't have the memories I had. And that does make me sad, because I did have a lot of good memories, a lot of clean memories. But maybe a bit of this kind of understanding is what is needed in this, more than just finger pointing and going wrong, wrong, wrong. Just some food for thought.